BYU basketball pulls out a gutsy win against Baylor. Is Kanon Catchings finally breaking out of his shell, and what it means for the Cougars going forward? That's all coming up on a Wednesday edition of the Loyal Cougars podcast. Hello and welcome to the Active Podcast Studio. This is the Loyal Cougars podcast, a special Wednesday edition. We could not wait to talk about this Baylor game against BYU that happened Tuesday night, and so we're in the studio on a Wednesday with the OG Tosh Mackintosh. Welcome, Tosh. Thanks for joining us again.
Happy to be here, talking about a fun game and fun times right now.
So I texted Tosh this morning, and I said, I don't want to wait until Monday to talk about this game because we have our episodes every Monday. We launch them or release them every Monday. And I said, I don't want to talk about this game on Monday. I want to talk about Saturday's game on Monday. This game is too important to wait until Monday because of the implications of the game itself, the way they won, Canon Catchings, we'll talk about that. But so many things happened in this game that I just didn't want to wait. And, we can start with Canon. I think Canon, obviously, everyone's talking about how Canon played and the fact that Canon didn't play for the last, 3.5 minutes of this game and most of overtime.
All of overtime.
Sorry, 3.5 minutes of regulation.
Yeah.
And all of overtime. Let's start with the positive, though. Canon did not miss. Right, Canon was perfect from the field, perfect from the free throw line.
He quite literally did not miss.
Not miss, and I read somewhere, and I wish I could pull it up, but I read that he is the only freshman in NCAA history to go 8 of 8 from the field. I think he went 3 or 4 of 4, and then perfect from the free throw line.
Yeah,
and for a guy that averaged 6 points a game all season, and really felt like he was in the doghouse, not because of his attitude, because I think his attitude's been kind of fine. You can tell he's kind of sulking because he
lost his starting position.
Yeah, he lost his starting position. I think he kind of felt bad for himself because he wasn't playing to what he knew was his capability. And so I don't think his attitude was poor because he was benched per se, but you could tell he was sulking and he was struggling. And so a guy in that position to turn it around in the last 2 games, but especially at home against Baylor, it tells me that he's kind of coming out of his shell now.
Yeah. I mean, he's just 1 year removed from high school, and he looks it. I mean, he's the most baby-faced guy we got on the roster. He's not broad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think what's clicked is his confidence. In the last several games, he just has a different vibe out there. And if I was to put it in a sentence, when he puts the ball up, he expects it to go in. And then lately it has been. And if he's not going to be perfect, but if he can be a good 3-point shooter and continue to be able to beat his guy off the dribble and finish at the rim, that is the missing piece I think this team needs that makes us a real tough out down the stretch if Canon's still feeling it.
23 points and a game where I thought he really played within the offensive system. You would look. In fact, Canon's done this in the past where, he'll make a shot and then his very next shot is just this ill-advised heat check. He thinks he's like I made a 3-pointer. I'm hot, right?
Yeah.
He did not do that this game. I actually thought he could have. There were a couple possessions where I think he passed it when he had space to shoot. And that that tells you a lot about his maturity. He's kind of growing into the system. I think Kevin Young has really gotten to him in terms of coaching. He's kind of he's coaching him to be a mature basketball player, and we saw a lot of that in the game. Now it's interesting because we talk so much about Richie Saunders and how well he has played throughout the entire season, especially in conference play. He had a down game. And so what a perfect game for Canon to step up and score 23. Now, I say he had a bad game. He still had 17 points on 6 of 15 shooting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Saunders had some clutch buckets in the end. Really, if you had asked me 2 weeks ago, what is this squad missing? We had lost every close game we had been in until last night. Mm-hmm. I would say the answer is we don't have somebody who wants the ball and has the ability to score in those clutch ending moments. But I feel like now I think there's 2 guys that can do it. Saunders has proven it, And Catchings is that type of guy and has those physical attributes. He wasn't in at the end of the game, but I loved that Saunders had some clutch buckets down the stretch where it's like, okay, give it to Saunders. And we need that guy, and hopefully he continues to develop into that.
Yeah, I don't think Saunders. It felt like he was struggling. Again, 17 points. I don't think he's going to be quote unquote struggling very often. He's a senior. Or is he a junior?
He's a junior.
Junior, but upperclassman. He's got the experience. He's not the type of player that's going to be quote unquote down for very long. What I thought was interesting, and this is kind of what's getting a lot of talk on social media and on Cougar Board, is Canon not playing for a majority of the last 3.5 minutes. He came in the last possession of regulation, more as a decoy. They didn't even draw a play up for him, and then all of overtime. I want to get your take, because I have kind of differing opinions, and I have a really hard time landing on a single opinion because I see a lot of different sides to multiple arguments, including this one. But did you like the fact that Canon wasn't out on the floor?
No.
It felt weird, right?
Absolutely. The guy's 8 for 8, had not missed a shot. I think the other context that plays into it is we're seeing these talented freshmen on the other team come into their own. And it's like, we've got one of these who was out playing these guys, and then now he's not in the game. I was yelling for those around me to hear. Which it was, I watched this game at home. It was just me and my son. And my son is like, he must be hurt. He must be sick. There's no way that he's not in right now. But that wasn't the case. Because down the stretch, especially in regulation, I think we gave up a 8-2 run. And our guys, we were running out clock, and then we were throwing the ball to one guy, and he really had 5 seconds to get a shot. Saunders can do that okay. No one else on our squad can. But again, Catchings can. And it's like, dude, let's see what Catchings can do here. This is his time to shine.
Yeah, and to be fair, Catchings wasn't that guy last week, right? Literally, last Tuesday, right? He wasn't that guy. And so I totally get both sides of the argument, but I was the same. During the game, I was like, why would you not at least put him on the floor? He's the hot hand. Why would you not go to him? Why would you not at least put him in until he misses a shot or he makes a bad decision? Like, he played almost perfectly the entire game. Now, there were a couple defensive possessions where I think he overcommitted, but I would rather have that. Mag does that all the time, right? He overcommits, but it's almost like in a good way where it forces the offense to do something, and sometimes they force up a bad shot. But you're exactly right. He went toe-to-toe with VJ Edgecombe. By the way, VJ Edgecombe ended up with 28 points in 43 minutes. And we can talk about Baylor's lineup in a little bit, but Canon had 23 and 25 minutes. I mean, he was more efficient than what people are projecting the number 4 overall pick in the NBA draft next year or this year.
And it's like one of those, what could he have done if we would have given him real time? That eats at me a little bit. Again, though, we won. It was a must-win game, our first quarter one win of the season. So I don't want to be too critical, because what we did ended up getting us the W. And also to defend some of the reasoning, Catchings on the year is only a 50% free throw shooter. And it's hard to have that guy on the floor in real clutch moments, which all the time he was off, I would classify those were real clutch moments. His defense is not as good as the players that sometimes he's competing. Not as good as Mag for sure. Debatable with some of the other guards. But again, it's not like we won that game with defense down the stretch. Mm-hmm. Our defense was terrible. We outscored those guys and just kind of that's how we got the win.
And give credit to Baylor's offense. They have ballers. And it's interesting because it's kind of there's kind of two sides to this, right? I think the fact that they run a 6-man lineup can actually benefit them in game to the fact that they're used to playing with each other. They know, they're not switching lineups mid game, so they know who's on the floor, where they're going to be. These guys have experience running plays together. Like, I think having a shortened rotation helps, but also in a game that goes to overtime when players are on the floor for 43, 41, 38, 36, and 36 minutes. Those are their starting five. The next highest was Celestine, who had 25 minutes, and then Jason Asamoah had 6. Nobody else played.
It's crazy.
7 guys, 6 of which played more than 20 minutes, 5 of which played more than 35 minutes. I don't think that's sustainable for a season, especially when you have overtime games. But again, I think it allows them to gel a little bit better. But Baylor's offense is nothing to scoff at. And so, yeah, we'll talk about BYU's defense. And granted, you and I talked off air before we started the show. There were things that BYU did that was like head scratching and, like you said, yelling. By the way, my wife knew how important this game was to me, and she wanted to sleep. So she banished me to the basement. I usually watch these kind of late night games in bed. I'm just kind of like on my phone, or I'll turn the TV on in my bedroom if it's not too late and she's not wanting to sleep. But she definitely was like, I don't want you in the room. So she, again, I'm yelling at the screen, and the specific play, and there were multiple plays like this, but the one that comes to mind is, I think, overtime, if not end of regulation, but I think pretty sure it was overtime. VJ Edgecombe is coming off of a screen, and Mag is guarding him. And by the way, I think Mag actually did a really good job overall. I know Edgecombe had 28 points, but Mag, I think when Mag was on him, he was pretty well shut down. He like face guarded him. But this one possession, Mag went under the screen and just got stuck.
Yeah.
And
he just steps into a 3 and just hit it like it was nothing.
He's like trying to like block the shot over the screen. It's like, that's not going to work, dude. Like you've got to get around it. I think BYU's defense is better built to go above screens. You can't go under a screen, especially against a guy like Edgecombe who's on fire, similar to Kanon, for the whole game. The other issue that I have, and I've said this before, is the zone. And granted, I think they, more often than not, the zone seems to work, but it also seems like when Baylor gets these wide open looks, it's against a zone when they overload one side, right? Because that's how you beat a zone, is you overload one side. You essentially negate the weak side defender, right? Because he's got no one to defend. And Baylor had a couple possessions where they just had wide open corner threes. Edgecombe had one of them. And so, defensively, I think BYU struggled as much as, again, they could in a win, allowing 89 points, but they scored 93, and I think offensively they were just a juggernaut.
Yeah, I mean, right. We haven't even mentioned him yet. He just took over the game down the stretch, and it's like he was getting a pretty nice whistle from the refs on some of those. At the same time, he hit every free throw he took, and he had 2 clutch threes in a row to keep his team in it and send it to overtime. Like, they had some freaking players, and we beat those guys.
Yep.
That's where, if I'm like listing off kind of some thoughts, I think yesterday could be a real pivotal game with our guys getting confidence, not just from the eye test, from the stats test. It's the best quality win we've had this year, but even from like a fun factor. At the beginning of this year, this team offensively wasn't very fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that was based in last year's team was surprisingly fun to watch. But the last 3-4 games, we have been incredibly fun to watch. And I give a lot of that is Yegor. That he's getting his confidence in his passing. He's hitting threes, which opens spacing. I feel like our guys are figuring out how to play. And so we're more fun to watch. We're also getting better at the right time. Historically, BYU has been, my whole life, pretty good in the regular season, but it feels like teams are peaking when we're just plateauing, and then we don't do anything in the tournaments. I am hoping this is the squad to end that, where we make a conference tournament run and we make a real tournament run, because it does feel like we're trending in the right direction right now.
Yeah. And you mentioned this was a quad 1 win. Baylor, so quad 1 is if you're at home, they have to be a top 30 team in net ranking, NCAA's net ranking. Baylor only fell to 29. They were 28 before the game. They only fell to 29. So this is still a Q1 win. BYU now 1-3 in Q1 wins. They are 3-3 in Q2 wins and 4-0, 6-0 in quad 3 and quad 4 wins. And so that, you start looking at an NCAA tournament resume, that's a huge win, especially if Baylor can continue to win and stay in that top 30. That's a big win. It's interesting, though, now to look back, right? You always look back and you think, like, what if, right? Utah, TCU, Texas Tech.
Ole Miss, too.
Ole Miss, too. Ole Miss went to overtime, right? Like, there's these, like, 4 close games that you're like, man, that could have gone either way. If 2 of those go the other way, BYU's in contention. They're probably not even on the bubble. They're probably in right now.
Yeah.
And Lunardi hasn't released his updated bracketology this morning. I'm sure it'll come out after this gets released. But I'm guessing BYU is probably one of the first 4 out, would be my guess. They're probably just now getting on the bubble now because of that win, but they've got to keep winning.
Oh yeah, and we won. We went on this nice streak when we needed to. We've still got some winnable games ahead of us.
Yeah.
UCF at UCF, and we've only won 1 road game, which is crazy to say this deep into the season.
Yeah.
But UCF should have beat Kansas. Like, UCF is not. They're pretty comparable to BYU. And so it's not an easy win. And then we have Arizona. It's at home. That should be another fun win. So I freaking love the Big 12. I love the teams that we play. But we do have some winnable but tough games coming up that we need that. We have to win tough games to get ourselves into the tournament.
Yeah. Let's talk about those. We're going to talk about kind of what this means moving forward now for BYU, because again, their schedule becomes one of the most challenging in the conference. And so I want to break down a little bit of the future schedule, and we'll do that coming up on the Loyal Cougars podcast. This episode is brought to you by Aptiv. Aptiv believes every home should be enjoyed. They tailor their pest control treatment plans to target pests when and where they're most active. Plus, if you see pest activity between treatments, Aptiv will return to take care of the problem at no additional cost. It's their way of making sure every customer is satisfied and every pest is controlled. If pests stay away, Aptiv is why. Visit goaptiv.com/loyalcougars or call 844-966-4787 and mention this promotion to get your initial treatment for just $29. That's goaptiv.com/loyalcougars or call 844-966-4787. Get home field advantage with Aptiv. All right, so as we mentioned, BYU still has a very difficult Big 12 schedule remaining, but they do sit in 6th place in the Big 12 standings, which I think after the Utah loss, and it wasn't just because of their record, but because of who they had played and who they had lost to, honestly, it felt like it was kind of lost, right? It didn't feel like they were going to beat a team like Baylor. It honestly didn't feel like they would, potentially beat a team like Cincinnati. Colorado was kind of a gimme win, but it feels like BYU's turned it around to where we can now all of a sudden start talking about NCAA tournament again, where it felt like that conversation was kind of just out the window after the Utah loss.
Totally agree. I mean, that was a gut punch for sure. I do like that we play them again.
Yes, at home, yeah.
But yeah, the schedule is now in a good spot where we have 11 Big 12 games left. We were talking, and we both agree that I think BYU needs to win 6 or 7. 7, we feel real good. So that means we actually have a little bit of wiggle room that we've played ourselves into. And the schedule, UCF this weekend is big. We need that one.
Yep.
And then going from memory, then it's Arizona at home, which Arizona is always one of the best teams in the country.
At Cincinnati.
Yes.
At West Virginia. That week's going to be wild.
Because Cincy's mad. I don't know how that's going to play into it. That last second shot, there's a lot of buzz about, we're going to get him back in a week. But I don't know how that actually plays. We should beat Cincinnati again.
Yeah,
put Crawford in again for the last second shot again.
That's it's wild that people are talking about that as much as they are. You BYU fans are defending it. Some BYU fans aren't. But honestly, who cares?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It was a blowout win. But yes, Cincinnati at home. And honestly, it's anybody on the road, right? I don't even care if it's Arizona State on the road.
Providence blew us out on the road.
Well, and Utah beat us, right? Utah's
Yeah.
not a great team. Now,
Correct.
Granted, Utah beat Cincinnati at home. But BYU just struggles on the road, and so they have to get over that. Colorado on the road does not count, right? They have to get a legitimate Q2, maybe Q1 win on the road for me to really start believing in their ability to win on the road. And at UCF this weekend is going to be the biggest test. I actually tweeted this, posted it on X, because UCF took Kansas to the wire, as you mentioned. Kansas is no pushover. And you factor in the addition of travel time, Eastern time zone. I think you start seeing obstacles in the way for BYU to win on the road. So if they can win at UCF, I become a believer in their ability to, potentially win at Cincinnati, win at West Virginia. They're probably not winning at Arizona. They probably are winning at Arizona State, but then they head to Iowa State.
Tough game.
In March. And so you start counting losses, and I think you and I agree. I think you can absorb about 4 more losses, I think, in conference play. So you start looking down the schedule.
We have Kansas. I mean, it's at home.
Kansas at home. I actually feel okay about that game. Granted, okay is like relative. I'd
give us, 35% chance?
I feel better about Kansas at home. And similar to what I said this week, I feel better about Baylor at home than I do UCF on the road. I feel better about Kansas at home than I do Arizona on the road.
Yeah.
These road games are just tough. And I said this in a previous podcast. You factor in these 2 freshmen that are 2 like impact player freshmen. And granted, Canon wasn't necessarily, he was kind of a lower minutes player before the Baylor game, but still a lottery, at least a first round draft pick guy. And then Yegor Demon. Freshmen seem to kind of buy into this momentum and this like confidence thing more than upperclassmen, meaning their peaks and valleys are a lot steeper
for sure
than a guy like Richie or a guy like Dallin. And so you go on the road and you face adversity. These freshmen tend to, now granted, we're more than halfway through the season. And so they're starting to feel more like sophomores probably, but still like they just don't really have, and I think that's why they've struggled so much on the road is they feed off of the energy of the crowd. And when that crowd energy is actually going against them, they seem to kind of buckle under pressure.
I'm hopeful that, UCF's not known to be this big basketball program, and I'm hopeful that it feels like a home game. Colorado did, where tons of BYU fans there. I'm actually going to be going to this game in Orlando, so I'll be doing my part. But I fully agree that especially freshmen, I think that the crowd can get into their head, and whether it's conscious or it's just this unconscious momentum thing, the stats prove we play very differently home and road this year.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this on our Monday podcast. UCF is a high pace team, so they're going to run you up and down the floor. I think BYU does pretty well with that. What I found interesting is that UCF actually allows a lot of 2-point shots and about average 3-point shots. So in other words, they run you off the line. Like they defend the perimeter as well as they can, and they force you inside as much as they can. And what's interesting about that, especially timing wise, is that BYU has seemed to figure out how to score from inside the 3-point line. It seems like early conference play, they were really trying to put up, kind of the Mark Pope mentality of like shoot as many threes as possible, even if they're like bad threes. Like he was like, there is, basically like everyone has the green light. And I think Kevin Young, that's like an NBA mentality, right? Like the corner 3 is one of the most efficient shots, I think, behind the layup. Layup is probably the most efficient shot, I think. But then the corner 3 and then like anything else beyond the arc is considered a good shot. Really anything outside of like 8 feet and inside the 3-point line is a quote unquote bad shot. So analytics tells you that you should be shooting threes or getting layups. And I think BYU kind of got caught up on that.
Yep.
To the point where they were essentially turning the ball over and forcing up bad shots because they would spend the entire shot clock trying to get the ball to Foose underneath or lob it to Keita or kick it outside for a 3. In fact, I've said this a couple times, but Yegor especially, but I'm sure other guards have done it. They'll set a screen. Yegor, he'll start to drive and he'll terminate it like before he even really gets to like the key even. Like he doesn't even try to drive it to the rim because the defense will sag off of that screen, and he knows he can't get to the rim because the defender, the screen defender is at the rim, right?
Yeah.
There's no point in going. And that was hurting them, right? They weren't getting to the rim, and the perimeter defenders weren't leaving their guys. And so at that point, he had nowhere to go, and he would, either turn it over, dribble it off his foot or whatever, or make an errant pass to the perimeter and get it picked off. And he and other guys are learning that you don't have to get to the rim. And we saw this a lot during the Cincinnati game. They were just kind of putting up these floaters, or like you saw Dawson Baker last game.
Yeah.
Just do a turnaround shot over one of their big men. It was actually like a really nice shot. Kanon had another one at the baseline where he just like took a step in and shot it. Again, these are quote unquote bad shots, but it's what's opening up the offense for BYU.
Nail too, especially against Cincinnati. Yeah, you're right that we were finally willing to we get past our guy that's running us off the three. Let's shoot it before we get into the tall trees.
Yeah.
And that's been working because our only guards that can finish at the rim amongst the bigs are Catchings, and Yegor can do it. He's not a high flyer, but he's tall enough that he's pretty good there. But Baker and Nell, they have no business really trying to play above the rim if there's guys sagging and defending the rim.
Yeah, and I'll say really the only guys that can finish at the rim, especially when there's contact or when there's defenders trying to block the shot. Yegor's one of them, Kanon's one of them, and Richie's one of them. I think everyone else really struggles driving to the rim. Now, granted, Nell and I think Baker, they can score layups, but if there's a defender on them, and especially a longer defender, they struggle. And so for them to be, Richie had a great floater as well. I think every guard had some sort of 2-point either floater or jump shot that was analytics would tell you it's an errant shot, but that went in. And that really, again, it opens up the offense plus the ability to shoot the three. Everything was just working, and it's so fascinating to see once shots start going in, to see what it does to a defense, because when a defense can make you one-dimensional, it's extremely predictable, and it almost snowballs into this. If they're missing their 3-pointers, then we can totally just sag off. We can go under screens. Nothing opens up. Once you start hitting your floaters, once you start hitting your 3-pointers, they have to close out harder.
Yeah,
which allows you to drive more, which allows you then to lob it up to Akeda or dump it off to Foose. It just opens up so much more offense once you start making your shots. And I had Jeff Hansen on Monday, and he made this funny comment after the game. He's like, why didn't they do this all year? Why haven't they just just made their 3-pointers all year? That should just be the strategy. But it's that's the reality is once you start making shots, it opens up everything else. And we've seen that in the last couple games.
Absolutely. And I want to take a second, this little mid-week recap, but last night, again in clutch, and the whole season, where did Richie Saunders come from? My son teases me about this. To start the year, I said that Richie Saunders, and I meant this lovingly, it doesn't sound like it, but I did, that he's the ultimate trash man, that he'll do all the dirty work, and he's just the ultimate role player. And now he's having 30-point games, 20-point games like crazy. He's leading the Big 12 in 3-point percentage. And my son just loves he's the trash man, huh? Because again, I didn't even mean it mean. He was my favorite player last year because of how hard he played.
Yeah.
But now he plays hard, and he looks freaking offensively polished. And last night was the first time I felt like the announcers were really giving real time to, hey, is this guy an NBA player? And they're saying, we talked to scouts that are saying, hey, he's probably worked his way into that. And no one had that on their radar. And when we talked about BYU being this NBA pipeline, that was more so of these guys that were on the way. But what if we're still able to actually put these guys that are peripheral players into the league? That would be, what a fun mini story within this season.
Yeah, and he's the guy that would do it. I think Kevin Young's already compared him to an Alex Caruso. I think it's a perfect comp. The perfect microcosm of of Richie Saunders last night was, I think it was second half. I don't remember exactly when. He comes flying in for an offensive rebound, pump fakes, and goes up and lays it in while getting fouled. Like, that is the type of play that wins you basketball games, right? Like that, it's an effort play. Like he's obviously off from three. He's not shooting the ball well, but he just manufactured 17 points out of nowhere. And that's what he does.
The play you said was fantastic. I thought the play you were going to say is he drives in, gets fouled, it looks like, but makes the shot. The foul's not called. He's laying on his back. Mm-hmm. He gets up and then steals the in-band. And
it's like multiple plays, though.
Yeah.
That's what he does.
Those are the type of plays that just kill the morale of the other team.
Yeah.
Like, and then Yegor hit a 3 there. So it's a 5-point possession, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, this guy's freaking awesome.
So, obviously, lots of basketball to still play, and we'll continue to cover BYU. Hopefully, we cover more wins because they're a lot more fun to talk about. But this is a BYU team that I think has the potential to still make an NCAA tournament, which is wild, again, considering where they were just a couple of weeks ago. But we'll continue to follow this team, and hopefully we'll give you some good takes. And if you do like what you hear on this podcast, please go and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. Go like this video and subscribe to us on YouTube as well. And we're also on social media, Instagram. We're not on TikTok because we thought TikTok was going to get banned. But maybe we'll start a TikTok now because they are at least temporarily not banned. But we're also on Twitter. And we do have YouTube Shorts as well. So go and like and subscribe and follow us wherever you find your podcast and wherever you are on social media. And we would greatly appreciate that. For now, though, this is the Loyal Cougars podcast. We'll see you next week.